He said I'd never be enough. 10 years later, he sat across from me in my office. The glass door of the conference room swung open, and the man who once told me I would never amount to anything stepped inside. He was wearing a navy suit that didn't quite fit the way it used to. His shoulders were narrower now, or maybe the world had just gotten heavier for him. He carried a leather portfolio under one arm and a careful smile that faltered the second he looked up. I was standing at the head of the long table, one hand resting on the back of my chair. The city skyline stretched behind me through floor-to-ceiling windows. The morning light hit the table at an angle, making the polished wood glow warm. He stopped mid-step. His lips parted slightly. His eyes moved from the nameplate on the door to my face, and then back again. The color left his cheeks. He blinked twice, slowly, like a man trying to wake from something. I didn't blink at all. I had spent 10 years building this room. He had just walked into it thinking it belonged to someone else. "Vera?" he said. His voice cracked just slightly on the second syllable, like something small had broken behind his teeth. I didn't move. I let the silence sit between us for 3 full seconds. Then I pulled the chair out, sat down, and opened the folder in front of me. His resume. His name printed neatly at the top. Darian Holt. "Mr. Holt," I said. My voice was level. No warmth, no coldness, just professional. "Please take a seat." He hesitated. His hand tightened on the portfolio. His jaw shifted like he was chewing on a question he didn't want to ask. But he sat, slowly, like the chair might not hold him. The air in the room changed. It thickened. I could hear the quiet hum of the ventilation system overhead. I could feel his eyes searching my face for something familiar. I gave him nothing. Jasper Rowe, our HR director, sat to my left with his own copy of Darian's file. He didn't notice anything. To him, this was just another Tuesday interview. To me, it was 10 years arriving at once. His resume trembled. Not much, just enough to catch the light. He placed it on the table and pressed his fingers flat like he was trying to hold something still. Maybe the paper. Maybe himself. I scanned the page even though I had already read it twice. Marketing director at 2 mid-sized firms. A gap year listed vaguely as independent consulting. A master's degree he hadn't had when I knew him. 10 years ago, this man sat across from me in a cafe on Birch Street and told me I lacked ambition. He said it calmly, like he was reading from a list, like he had rehearsed it. He said he needed someone who matched his energy. Someone who wanted more. Then he left with my best friend. Now he sat in my boardroom, in my building, applying for a position 2 levels below mine. His hands were steady now, but his breathing wasn't. I could see the collar of his shirt tighten with every inhale. I picked up my pen. "Let's begin," I said, and I meant it in every sense of the word. "My name is Vera Calloway, and the last time I saw Darian Holt, he stood in the doorway of my apartment with a bag over his shoulder and pity in his eyes. He said, 'You'll be fine, Vera. You just won't be great.'" I was 22. I had just finished a degree in communications with a minor in nothing useful, according to him. I worked part-time at a print shop. I still believed that love meant standing beside someone even when they made you feel small. Darian believed love was a ladder, and I wasn't climbing fast enough. He left me for Leora Maddox, my roommate, my closest friend, the one who always laughed a little too loud at his jokes and stood a little too close at parties. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I stood in the hallway after the door closed and stared at the scuff marks his shoes had left on the floor. Then I locked the deadbolt, sat on the kitchen tile, and cried until my ribs ached. That was the last time I cried over someone else's opinion of me. I was raised in a small house with thin walls and thinner paychecks. My mother worked 2 jobs and still made dinner every night. She never once told me I was special. She told me I was capable. There's a difference. "Special means someone else decides your worth," she said once, folding laundry at midnight. "Capable means you decide it yourself." I carried that with me the way some people carry grudges. It lived in my chest, quiet and steady. I didn't need the world to notice me, I just needed to keep moving. When Darian left, the ground didn't open beneath me, it just went quiet. Like the volume had been turned down on everything I used to care about. Friends stopped calling. Social media became a minefield of their smiling faces. I started eating dinner alone, in silence, with the TV off. But I kept waking up. Kept going to work, kept circling job postings with a red pen. I didn't have a plan yet, but I had something more dangerous than ambition. I had something to prove to myself. The cafe on Birch Street had green awnings and a crooked chalkboard sign. I used to love that place. It smelled like cinnamon and old paper. I went there to study, to read, to sit across from Darian and pretend that everything was okay. It wasn't. He had started making comments months before the breakup. Small ones, the kind that don't leave marks but leave impressions. You're not really a leader type. You should aim for something realistic. Leora's applying for that grant. Maybe you should just support her. I didn't argue. That was my problem. I absorbed it. I folded his doubt into my own and carried it like something I deserved. Leora was there for most of it. She would smile gently and change the subject, which I mistook for kindness. It wasn't. She was simply keeping the water warm while I sat in it. The day he ended things, she was already waiting outside in her car. I found out later they had been together for 2 months before he said a word. I still remember the smell of that cafe. I haven't gone back. The weeks after were ugly, not in a dramatic way. In a quiet, forgettable way. I stopped putting on shoes unless I had to. I ate cereal standing over the sink. I watched the same 3 episodes of the same show every night because I couldn't focus long enough to follow anything new. People say heartbreak makes you stronger. That's not true. It makes you tired first. It makes your bones feel soft and your thoughts feel like wet cement. Darian and Leora posted their first photo together 6 days after he left. She was wearing the earrings I had lent her. The caption said something about finding your match. I read it 3 times. Then I closed the app and set my phone face down on the counter. My mother called that night. She didn't ask what happened. She just said, "Whatever you're feeling right now is not forever." I wanted to believe her, but everything felt permanent. The silence in my apartment, the empty closet, the second toothbrush holder with nothing in it. I lay on the couch and stared at the ceiling until morning came. One night, about a month later, I opened my laptop to look for jobs, not because I felt ready, because I felt broke. I scrolled past listings that seemed too big for me. Marketing coordinator, communications lead, project manager. Every title felt like a door with a lock I didn't have the key to. Then I saw one at the bottom of the page. Administrative assistant at a small consulting firm called Mercer Lane Group. The pay was low. The office was 20 minutes away by bus. The listing had been up for 3 weeks, which meant no one else wanted it. I applied at 11 at night with a resume I hadn't updated in a year. They called the next morning. The woman on the phone sounded surprised I was available. "Can you start Monday?" she asked. I said yes before I even checked my calendar. That Monday, I showed up 15 minutes early in the only blazer I owned. It had a loose thread on the sleeve. I tucked it under my cuff and walked through the door. No one noticed. That was fine. I wasn't there to be noticed. Mercer Lane Group had 12 employees and 1 coffee machine that never quite worked. My desk was in the corner near the supply closet. The chair squeaked. The monitor flickered on cold mornings. None of that mattered. I answered phones. I filed reports. I organized calendars and printed agendas and made sure the conference room had water before every meeting. It was invisible work. The kind nobody thanks you for. But I listened. That was the difference. I sat in on meetings and took notes no one asked me to take. I learned how the firm structured client proposals. I noticed which ones worked and which ones got rejected. I started asking questions after hours when the senior team was winding down and more willing to talk. One of them was a woman named Kala. She ran the strategy division. Sharp eyes, no patience for nonsense. She caught me reading a client brief at my desk one evening and raised an eyebrow. "You're not supposed to have that," she said. "I know," I said, but I wanted to understand why it worked. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she pulled up a chair. Kala became the first person in my adult life who taught me something without making me feel small. She didn't coddle me. She challenged me. She dropped binders on my desk with sticky notes that said things like, "Read this by Thursday," and "What would you cut from page 9?" She asked me to sit in on client calls, not to speak, just to learn how to read a room through someone's voice. I stayed late. I came early. I didn't do it for praise. I did it because for the first time, My effort felt like it was going somewhere. Within 6 months, I had moved from the supply closet corner to a cubicle near the strategy team. Within a year, I was drafting first versions of client proposals under Kala's name. She let me. Then she started putting my name on them too. Meanwhile, I heard through someone at a party that Darian and Leora had launched a startup. Something with apps. Everyone said it was brilliant. Everyone said they were going to be huge. I closed that conversation, went home, and opened a textbook on negotiation strategy. Their shine was not my concern. By year 3, I had been promoted twice. I had my own office. Small, no window but mine. My name was on the door in vinyl letters. I touched them every morning before I went in. Not out of pride, out of proof. I started leading client meetings. Small ones at first, then bigger. I learned how to hold a room, how to pause before answering a hard question, how to let silence do the work when words would only weaken the point. Kala watched me from the back of the room during one of those early presentations. Afterward, she said, "You don't try to impress people. That's why they trust you." I thought about Darian, how everything he did was performance, how every room he entered was a stage. I used to admire that about him. Now I saw it differently. Confidence that needs an audience isn't confidence. It's hunger. I didn't want applause. I wanted results. I wanted to know that what I built could stand even when no one was watching. And slowly, without fireworks or headlines, it did. Year 4 brought a turning point. Mercer Lane was acquired by a larger firm, and I was offered a role in the new company's communications division. It came with a real salary, benefits, and a window office on the 9th floor. I stood in that office on my first day, looking out over the city. The buildings caught the morning light like rows of teeth. I pressed my palm against the cool glass and let myself feel it. Not pride exactly, more like alignment, like the version of me standing there was finally matching the version I had imagined during those dark nights on the couch. I called my mother. She picked up on the first ring. "I got the office," I said. She paused. Then softly, "Good. Now don't let it define you." That was her way. She never let me get too comfortable in a victory. Not because she didn't care, because she knew comfort was the place where momentum went to die. I hung up, sat at my new desk, and opened my laptop. There were 47 unread emails waiting. I started with the oldest and worked forward. That same year, I saw Leora's name for the first time in a long time. Not in person. Online. A post shared by a mutual friend. Leora Maddox was starting a new chapter. That's what the caption said. The photo showed her in a different city, standing alone on a balcony. There was no mention of Darian. I stared at the photo longer than I should have. She looked thinner. Her smile was the same one I remembered, but the light behind it had changed. She looked like someone who had been holding a pose for too long and finally let it fall. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel pity either. Just a strange kind of distance. Like seeing a place you used to live and realizing it no longer has anything to do with you. I closed the app and went back to my emails. Later that week, I heard through a colleague that the startup Darian and Leora had built together had folded the year before. Investors pulled out. The product never launched. I filed that information away like a receipt. Noted. Not needed. Years 5 through 8 were not glamorous. They were grinding. Long hours, hard meetings. Deals that fell apart. Clients who changed their minds at the last second. Presentations that landed flat. Mornings where I sat in my car and needed a full minute before I could walk inside. But I kept going. Not because I was fearless, because I had already survived the worst kind of failure, which is someone you love telling you that you weren't enough. After that, a lost client didn't feel like the end of the world. It just felt like Tuesday. I got promoted again in year 6, then again in year 8. Each time, I paused. I let the news settle. I didn't celebrate loudly. I called my mother, told her the facts, and she said the same thing she always said. "Good. Keep going." By the end of year 8, I was overseeing a division of 32 people. I had my name on a parking spot and a budget I once would have been afraid to read. I wasn't the same girl from the café. And I never would be again. Year 9 brought the offer I didn't expect. The CEO at the time, a quiet man named Aldrich Vane, called me into his office on a Friday afternoon. He didn't sit behind his desk. He sat beside me. "I'm stepping down in 18 months, he said. I want you to take the division. I didn't react. Not right away. I asked why me. He leaned back and said, because you never once tried to take it, and that's exactly the kind of person who should have it. I spent the next year and a half preparing, learning, sitting in rooms I used to only read about, reviewing numbers, restructuring teams, and building trust with people who had been there longer than me. It wasn't easy. Some people didn't want a woman in that chair, some didn't want someone who started as an admin. I heard the whispers, I never addressed them directly. I just kept delivering, quarter after quarter. Meeting after meeting, decision after decision. Eventually the whispers stopped. Not because I silenced them. Because the results did. And by year 10, the office at the top of the building was mine. When Darian's application came through, I didn't recognize the name at first. Jasper had flagged it as a strong candidate for the mid-level marketing role. He brought me the file during a routine review. "This one's interesting," Jasper said, sliding the folder across my desk. "Solid experience, some gaps, but a compelling cover letter." I opened it. The name at the top hit like a cold draft from an open window. Darian Holt. I read the whole thing without moving. His career summary read like a map with too many detours. 2 years here, 18 months there. A startup listed as co-founder with no company name. A gap year, filed under consulting. He was good on paper, just not as good as he used to think he was. I could have passed the file to someone else. I could have flagged the conflict. That would have been cleaner. Safer. But something in me needed to sit in that room. Not to punish him. Not to gloat. I needed to see if the version of me I had built could hold steady when the past walked through the door. I told Jasper I would sit in on the interview. The morning of the interview, I arrived early. I set the room up myself. Water glasses, fresh notepads, 2 pens, both blue. I adjusted the blinds so the light came in evenly. No harsh shadows on his side, no advantage on mine. I wanted it to be fair. That mattered to me more than anything, not fairness for his sake. For mine. I had spent 10 years becoming someone who didn't need to manipulate a room to feel powerful. I wasn't going to start now. Jasper came in at 8:45. He reviewed his notes and made small talk about the weekend. I listened and nodded. My hands were calm, my breathing was steady. At 9 o'clock sharp, the receptionist called. Mr. Holt had arrived. I stood, straightened my jacket, took one slow breath, then I walked to the conference room and waited by the window. When the glass door opened and he stepped inside, everything I had carried for a decade sat between us like furniture in a room neither of us had chosen. He froze. I didn't. And that was the difference 10 years had made. He tried to recover quickly. I'll give him that. He blinked, swallowed, and then sat down with the careful control of someone walking across a frozen lake. Jasper started with the standard opening. Company overview, role expectations, team structure. Darian nodded along, but his eyes kept drifting to me. Not with suspicion, with disbelief. When it was my turn to speak, I introduced myself the way I introduced myself to every candidate. Name, title, role in the process. Nothing personal, nothing loaded. Vera Calloway, I said. I oversee this division. He nodded, his mouth opened slightly, then closed again. I could see the math happening behind his eyes. The girl from the café, the apartment with the scuffed hallway, the one he said would never be great. Sitting at the head of this table. I didn't pause for effect. I moved directly into my first question. Can you walk me through a time when you had to rebuild after a significant professional setback? His throat moved. He cleared it once, then began speaking. His voice was thinner than I remembered. I listened the same way I listened to every candidate. With full attention, without judgment. His answers were decent, not remarkable, but polished. He talked about the startup without naming it. He talked about learning to work under someone else's vision after years of trying to build his own. He talked about growth. I watched his hands while he spoke. They were still. No trembling now. He had steadied himself. That told me something. He wasn't fragile. He was humbled. There's a difference. Jasper asked about leadership style. Darian gave a textbook answer about collaboration and listening. Fine. Safe. Then I asked my second question. Tell me about a time you misjudged someone's potential. The room went still. Jasper didn't notice the weight behind it. He was writing notes. But Darian's eyes lifted from the table and met mine for the first time since he sat down. He didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened. His fingers pressed lightly against the edge of his portfolio. I didn't look away. I didn't soften the question. I just waited. He let out a slow breath and said, "That's a good question." Then he paused for a long time. He finally spoke. "Early in my career," he said, choosing his words carefully, "I made judgments about people based on where they were, not where they were going. I thought ambition looked a certain way. I was wrong." He didn't say my name. He didn't reference the past directly. But the words were aimed carefully, and we both knew where they landed. I wrote something on my notepad. Not his answer. Just a line to keep my hands busy. A single word. Steady. Jasper asked 2 more questions. Darian answered them cleanly. He asked about next steps. Jasper explained the process. 2 rounds, reference checks, a decision within 10 days. Darian stood, buttoned his jacket, and extended his hand to Jasper first, then to me. I shook it. Firm, brief. His palm was warm and dry. His eyes held mine for 1 extra second. "Thank you for the opportunity," he said quietly. I nodded. "We'll be in touch." He walked out of the conference room the same way he had walked in, carefully, like the floor might shift beneath him at any moment. This time, I watched him leave. After the door closed, Jasper leaned back and tapped his pen on the table. "He's solid," he said. "Bit of a winding path, but the experience is there. What do you think?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at the empty chair where Darian had been sitting, the water glass he hadn't touched, the faint indent his portfolio had left on the leather surface. "He's qualified," I said. Jasper nodded. "I'd put him in the 2nd round. Run the full process," I said. "Same as anyone." Jasper made a note and moved on to the next file. For him, this was routine. Another candidate, another Tuesday. For me, it was the end of something I hadn't realized I was still carrying. I went back to my office, closed the door, stood at the window and looked out at the skyline I had earned 1 year at a time. My hands were steady, my breathing was normal, my chest was quiet, no anger, no triumph, no tears, just a woman standing in a room she had built, watching the past walk itself out. That evening, I drove to my mother's house. She lived in the same small place with the thin walls, but I had redone the kitchen 2 years ago and replaced the windows last spring. She was sitting on the porch when I pulled up. A cup of tea balanced on the arm of her chair. "You look like you've been thinking too hard," she said. I sat beside her and told her. "Not everything. Just enough. The interview. The name. The face from 10 years ago, showing up in my conference room." She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she took a sip of her tea and said, "Did he know who you were?" "He figured it out," I said. "And what did you do?" "My job." She smiled. A small one, the kind she saved for moments that mattered. "That's all you ever needed to do." We sat in silence for a while. The porch light attracted moths. The neighbor's dog barked twice and then stopped. The sky turned a deep purple and then slowly went black. I didn't need her to say she was proud. I already knew. The next morning, I sat at my desk and reviewed the full list of candidates for the role. There were 8. Darian was 3rd on the list. His file sat in the middle of the stack, no different from the others. I read each one carefully, made notes, scored them on the same criteria I always used: experience, communication, cultural fit, adaptability. 2 candidates stood out above the rest. One had 12 years in our exact industry. The other had led a team through a merger with 0 turnover. Both had stronger track records than Darian. I flagged them for the final round. Darian didn't make the cut. Not because of what he said in that café 10 years ago. Not because of Leora or the apartment or the scuff marks on the floor. He didn't make it because 2 people were simply better for the role. I signed the recommendation sheet and placed it in Jasper's inbox. My hand didn't shake, my heart didn't race. It was just a decision, clean, professional, based on fact. And that, more than anything, was the revenge I never planned. That afternoon, Jasper stopped by my office with 2 coffees. He set one on my desk and said, "We're moving forward with Patel and Driscoll for the final round." I nodded. "Good choices." He paused at the door. "That second candidate, Holt, did you know him?" I looked up from my screen. "Why do you ask?" "He asked the receptionist about you on his way out, wanted to know how long you'd been running the division." I let the silence hold for a beat. "We crossed paths a long time ago." Jasper nodded, satisfied, and left. I leaned back in my chair and let the quiet settle around me. The office hummed softly. The city moved outside the glass. A pigeon landed on the window ledge and sat there like it had nowhere else to be. I thought about the girl in the café, the one who stared at her coffee and believed the man across from her when he said she wasn't enough. She would have been proud of this moment, not because of who she became, because she chose to become anyone at all. I didn't reject Darian out of spite. I didn't hire him out of guilt. I treated him the way I treat everyone who sits across from me in that room, with fairness, with attention, with the same steady hand that carried me from the supply closet to the corner office. He walked into my building looking for a second chance, and the truth is, I hope he finds one. Just not here. Not from me. Not because the history would interfere, but because someone else earned it more. That's not cruelty, that's clarity. I used to think success meant proving Darian wrong, but it doesn't. Success is waking up every morning and doing the work without needing someone else to see it. It's building something so solid that the past can walk through the front door and nothing shakes. He said I would never be enough. 10 years later, he sat across from me in my office, and for the first time in my life, I didn't need him to see my worth. I already knew it. And that was more than enough.